Welcome to our latest BPM webinar on outsourcing. Stop playing whack-a-mole in your back office and stop reappearing problems before they start. For those who don't know us as a firm very well, very quick introduction of BPM. We are a full-service accounting and consulting firm, started in 1986, and now greater than 600 professionals, largely on the West Coast, but becoming less and less concentrated so, and with folks around the country and a few in Canada as well as India. So I'm going to let the panel do a quick introduction of themselves, starting with Jill, and we'll do Jill, Mike, and Mark.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So I'm Jill Pappenheimer, partner at BPM, and I lead our HR consulting practice. And our practice supports all size organizations from small to large, from a project-based support of elevating that HR function to doing complete outsource. So we can support from A to Z anything HR related. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get going with the presentation. I look forward to it. Thank you.
I'm Michael Salai. I'm a partner at BPM, and I run the Managed IT Service Group. We help organizations support, maintain their IT systems, and we help organizations grow their IT systems, help them move from on-premise applications and systems up to the cloud, and help organizations organize their systems and maintain their fleet of laptops and applications and users.
Thanks, Mike. This is Mark Leverett. I'm a partner in assurance and advisory, so I have a history of doing audits, so I know what auditors like to see. In the advisory practice, I focus on a few different industries, but our group runs the gamut across all industries that we have in the firm, and we focus on a wide range of clients, small to big, and hope you learn a bunch on this call about how we can help the back office accounting.
Thank you, Mark. And lastly, I'll do a quick intro of myself. I am a partner in the advisory group as well, and on the corporate finance team. So largely the non-accountants doing a great deal of work looking forward and helping companies plan for some sort of point of inflection. Most of our introductions are during a key change event or something has happened inside or to the company. So I'm going to kick it off with Jill. Jill, we talked about this last week, but the people side of organizations is such an interesting and tricky subject, especially now. But properly leveraged people are our single greatest asset, of course. So how does a company get their head around all of this and around leveraging people? And how does that need interact with outsourcing?
Yeah, it is such a unique time in our history, right? During this pandemic, the aspect of isolation and remote work really just wreaks havoc on our employees. And because of that, we have to take a new lens into the HR function and think about supporting people from a different angle. And so I'm going to touch on really what the ideal would look like, but also new consideration. So really what this slide is telling us that we now, because we're so much a remote workforce throughout our culture, throughout the United States, and this is new and different, 25 to 30% are going to probably stay on this mode of working remotely. And a lot of companies have made huge shifts to make that work. At the same time, you really have about almost half of our workforce are feeling non-engaged. So that's pretty staggering to think that behind the Zoom meeting, people sitting in their chairs looking at you are feeling disengaged from or not engaged from the companies they work for. And of that, 14% of that 54 are feeling actively disengaged. So we've never seen numbers like this. In our history, in HR, we've been capturing engagement levels, and this has never been seen, this lowest level. Even at times of 9/11 or past recessions, we have not seen engagement levels so low. So what can we do as organizations to help support people differently. And we can help through that conversation from multiple angles. Ideally, what we want is not only to get people more engaged, but to harness the untapped potential of people. So we could go from here or we could go here. And so ideally, we're going to want to create a culture where people are thoroughly in. Organizations have multiple ways that they can approach their employees in terms of helping to get the level of engagement up and building a culture that's cohesive and collaborative. First, looking at work. So the work that we do, this is all, and just to back up a little bit, this whole slide is representing what is the ideal. What is the ideal to make the organization that you work for invincible in terms of attracting people, retaining people, and having people be engaged at a higher level. So ideally, work is meaningful to people, collaborative, there's a work-life balance and people aren't feeling overwhelmed. And this is a really challenging topic right now as we're managing this remote life and sitting behind Zoom meetings all day. I know I struggle with this. And so we have to look at work-life balance differently and really prioritize that for our employees. In terms of management, we want, as a manager, we want to make sure our employees have clearly defined goals that they participated in defining, that we're creating an environment where we're coaching our employees, not just managing, but coaching them, and creating ongoing feedback, skill development, and then aligning people to strategy is really key. To keep that collaboration and that cohesiveness, you need people to really see the end game of what is our strategy and how do I feel connected. In terms of this third line here, produce is really referring to culture. What does that culture need to look like? Ideally, flexible work environment, recognizing employees, and remote work collaboration, inclusive culture. So let me just do that, talk a little bit about inclusive culture. Diversity, equity, inclusion, a subject that is so key and front of mind for many organizations, for many people. And so I would argue if you don't have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program, and that's not a priority, you might want to think about how you can shift to make it a priority and what that might look like. Grow, really looking at growing employees. Employees need to feel honored and have opportunity for development and learning and being mentored, and some flexibility in the positions that they might have within your organization. Leadership, we want people to feel like leadership really has presented a vision that everybody can get behind, feel like there's a purpose within their organization, investment in their people, and is that leaders are trusted, that the employees feel trust in the leadership team, and they're forward thinking. And then this last line refers to, you could just summarize this as this is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that you have to have those basic components of that hierarchy covered, such as feeling safe, getting financial needs met at the basic level, feeling the physical well-being and happiness and emotional support. So this slide really kind of captures the ideal, and it's very hard to get all of this, and I wouldn't put that out there that you have to get all of this, but really to try to strive to embracing as much as what's on this slide as possible.
A lot of what you mentioned, and I know we've run into this with our clients, it represents a big change. It represents a big change for leadership. If you have a second, can you talk through how people can begin to embrace this as an organization and as leaders, and how you've helped that process unfold?
How do you really shift to embrace more of these components? You want to think about the programs you have within your organization around learning and development. You want to think about the systems you're using to support capturing opportunities for people. Systems, I think, are key in this day and age to, one, visually support where you're trying to go. So ensuring that, for example, with career development and learning and development, that there's identified next steps for employees and you're working towards that and that's being captured. Maybe your company is paying for a certain amount of support around education and training. That's one example. I would say clear goals right around management, that second level tier. You want to really, this is around performance management, right? And what are you doing for performance management? You want to make sure that ongoing feedback is happening between employees and managers and that there is that line of sight. I would recommend, BPM has a tool called BPM Link, which really helps support that and facilitate those key elements. So again, systems are key, but you also want to get leadership around this. Leadership is key. Everything starts at the top and you're facilitating a culture through the leadership team on down. So I'm going to talk a little bit about HR outsourcing. We can do both HR outsourcing and augmentation of your HR function. So if your HR function is either has minimal skill level of people in that function or minimal staff or maybe no staff, these are some options in a way that we can support your organization. Our team are all mid to senior level, so we're unique in that. Minimum of 12 years experience across the board. And generalists, so we get in on the tactical to the strategic to help organizations through one consultant that's dedicated to your team, although we can add more if needed. And it's a very hands-on solution where we want to know the leadership team and the employees and really support specifically what makes sense for your organization. So it could be a complete outsource, it could be a partial outsource working with the internal team, or we can help with just interim staffing. So multiple ways that we can support, whether that's hourly basis or project basis. Instead of just an outsource scenario, we can support the organization. And really, I would argue, think about augmentation as you may have an HR function, but maybe it's here and you want to take it here. So you want to take it up a notch so that you can support all those items I talked about in the slide, that's how do we become invincible. And so to do that, you may need additional support to get you there. And that may mean looking at and assessing the function and just identifying what your current team needs to do to focus on getting it to the next level. It could be a compliance focus in terms of project work. It could be maybe your performance management process right now is more annual reviews, which has clearly been defined as not what really is needed, because that's looking back versus being forward thinking and creating a cadence of ongoing conversations. So we can help by looking at that process and implementing tools to help support change there. Compensation, whether that's the entire structure, your compensation needs support and analysis and developing a comp plan, or maybe it's more focused at certain tiers. HR systems, we get into a lot of different systems and optimization, and we're agnostic in terms of systems. There could be a focus on coaching, training, and developing employees or managers or both. M&A due diligence, if you're going through an M&A transition, you want to absolutely make sure that the entities coming together are going to gel well. And to do that, you have to look at the cultures, you have to look at programs, policies, people, and make sure that those entities are going to be able to come together in a way that makes sense. Helping to develop culture is also a key component of how we can help supplement an HR team and get you to the next level. And then, as I mentioned earlier, diversity, equity, and inclusion, so key right now that everybody has a level playing field and is feeling part of the culture and environment that you've created.
Jill, thanks very much. That was great. Uh, so Mike, what's the big deal? IT is easy, right? I know my machine always works. I never have any issues with passwords or the cloud, wherever that is. But seriously, when does a company know it's time to get help? And can a startup get away with going it alone and trying to hire up themselves, or what's a good way of thinking about getting started as a business?
Let's see. That's a complicated question there, and there's a lot of different directions you can go with that. So organizations shifting, either growing, maintaining, or shrinking, will need to always constantly look at their IT infrastructure. Be it security is top of mind of everybody right now, and employee efficiency. With a lot of legacy organizations having equipment and systems within the physical walls of their old office, trying to figure out how organizations are going to really maximize the employees' utilization of those systems outside of the office. And so we're having a lot of clients taking a look at that. How, hey, what happens if I eventually get rid of this office? Where am I going to put these systems? How can you help us? Is the cloud secure? Can I make the cloud secure? So the answer is yes to all of those questions. And Manage IT can help organizations get there, either full stop or just in pieces. Where are you? Are you trying to build your IT infrastructure, or are you trying to maintain your IT infrastructure? So in Manage IT, we have lots of different pieces that we can augment your organization. And in organizations that are looking to build, is all project-based. And so you're like, we have an IT manager or a full-time person, but taking projects and putting those projects on those people's plate can be overwhelming. And you'll definitely see a drop-off of the level of support that they're giving to their existing organization while they're trying to bring a new system in. So a perfect example of why you would take a look at outsourcing and IT consulting or managed IT. We really see this in fast-growing companies because they have nothing. A startup is starting from scratch. They're, the first thing that they do is they go buy their domain, and they're gonna, find an email provider. Most of it's either Google with G Suite or Microsoft with Office 365. And so on the other side of things is maintaining those systems. So as we see organizations either not have any IT, they need a place to go. They need to have their employees have a place to go to figure out why their machine's not working. Why can't they get access to certain systems? So just the regular maintenance of supporting all of those users and the systems that they're using. And then what we've seen is even with those startup companies that are purely in the cloud, there's a level of amount of employees that the requests just start getting overwhelming. And looking at outsourcing and augmentation of your existing IT department starts to kick in. As your really high dollar, IT managers are being bogged down by basic requests. Hey, can I reset my password? Can you help me reset my password? Can you add me to the distribution list? Can I get access to this, particular file or folder or application? And so we can step in. We can step in with really low-hanging fruit support, first level support, or we can fill in with very specialty skill sets. As some of our organizations, they'll bring an IT manager on, have a lot of experience with the cloud, but they still have this legacy server, and they're like, we don't have any of the server experience. So go ahead and outsource that fixed fee service, proactive support that we put in place on those physical servers. And the same thing with the network. Network skill sets are pretty sought after and at a very high level. And so where we see a lot of organizations saying, hey, we have a network, we have an IT manager, they're not that experienced in the networking. Can we look at, helping out from you guys? Go ahead and next slide. And so this is kind of that partial experience. So, hey, I'm a company of 25 people. I don't have an IT person working full time, and I just need a little bit. I need a partial, desktop support person. I need a partial security support person, and so on, network, server, all of these little pieces. In outsourcing and managed IT, we have the full-time people here that have built up their skills through the years of doing IT support and have gravitated towards a particular line of being a network specialist or being a security specialist, because that's what they really love doing. And so you can just go ahead and get that partial experience of when you need them, on the ongoing basis. So my favorite thing to do is talk about my clients, how my clients consume our services. And so I'm going to go into some examples of some small organizations, some mid-sized organizations, some really, large organizations, and how they're utilizing us in different ways. So next slide.
And Mike,
yeah.
one of the things that sounded like you were beginning to highlight there, and maybe you can go deeper in your examples, is the ability for a company to leverage themselves, right? Not feel compelled to have to hire up, but to leverage the deep domain and functional expertise of a team. So maybe you can give examples of that as you go through your few client examples.
Actually, this customer right here is a really good example. So CDS Distributors, they're fruit and vegetable wholesale distribution company. They supply some really large organizations, Whole Foods, some other big grocery stores. So 20 employees, no full-time IT, and we're using a previous managed service provider. And that managed service provider really wasn't forward-looking. And so they had fallen behind on keeping up with technology. I call it IT debt. It kind of started getting so overwhelming, and they were getting behind in technology. So when we brought them on, we looked at the full stack of support for them. They needed to have all their employees be able to get frontline support. So that fixed fee model of help desk support. They still had physical servers that were running their key applications of ERP, and they have a full network in their office. It's great being part of BPM and being a full service, accounting and consulting. The first thing I did is I identified their ERP, and I went out to a specialist at BPM and said, hey, we need to get this application up to the cloud. Well, why do we need to get to the cloud? Because the rest of their organization is being hamstrung by this one application. And the employees were, dropping significantly in efficiency of being held back by this application. And so that migration to the cloud is releasing their entire organization to be able to get rid of those servers, leverage cloud applications, leverage the entire Office 365 suite of not just email, but their file storage platform, their computer and user management platform. And so we are winding down, almost completed with that project. And when it's fully done, they won't have any of that server infrastructure, and we'll be able to reduce some of their monthly fees on those support. But really what it is, the system is just going to be so much more simple and it's going to be user friendly. So to your point, Terry, this organization is going to get to the point where the frontline help desk support is going to start to reduce because employees will be empowered and know how to go online and share files and get files. And if they are not in the office and they need to work from home, that all can be done. And it can be done in a very secure way. And so to kind of finish off with this customer, we knew that we had the maintenance piece that was all fixed fee, but then we had that building piece that we bolted on hours every month. We'll just, we'll take it away of this big monolithic project on the rest of the upgrading the IT infrastructure to get them to where they needed to be and get them out of that, that tech debt that they had kind of built up over years and years. So let me talk about my next client. Go ahead and next slide. So Maximus Real Estate Partners. So it's a real estate firm. They own and manage about 8 apartment buildings throughout the Bay Area. They have 3 full-time IT people. And so they have an IT manager, they have a support person, and they have an application specialist person. And where their tech debt had kind of fallen in was the actual physical network of all their properties. They wanted to be able to deliver high quality wireless connectivity across all their properties and supporting a lot of their security cameras, door entry systems. And so they engaged us in that capacity. BPM, Managed IT, you have the expertise of 10 plus years of network engineer experience. Can you help us design, plan, and implement a very large wireless network across their properties? And we did this at their largest property at Park Merced. In that property, we built a wireless network to support all of these systems across 12 buildings. And then once we were completed with that project, they said, well, this is such a large network. We want to engage you on that first level support, where we want you to monitor and maintain that network. And if anything goes really haywire crazy, go ahead and give us a call. And then we'll figure out the next step. But this is something that we do every time they bring on a new property. We kind of rinse and repeat. We upgrade their network, and then we monitor and maintain. And so this was an organization saw a gap, a hole in their IT knowledge base, and went and sought after expertise and specialists in that field. And so let me go ahead and talk about my last client, which is kind of a culmination of everything. So CircleCI is a startup company. Well, maybe they're not a startup anymore, but very fast tech company. We're talking about an organization of 350 very tech savvy people. At first when they were a startup, they're like, hey, everybody can handle their own IT stuff. They don't need stuff. We can do everything. Well, then they started hitting that critical mass of security. Whoa, we're 50 people and, we have 65 online applications that are supporting this organization that's growing extremely quickly. We need to wrangle this beast before it gets out of control. So they came and they engaged us when they were about 50 employees, and they said, hey, we need help securing all these applications. Every single new hire class is going to consist of like 10 or 15 employees. So we need assistance growing so quickly. So they weren't a good fit for any of our maintenance packages because they didn't really have any systems to maintain. But what they needed is they need just consistent and quality consulting. And we did a very large identity management project wrapped around Okta, and then an onboarding project so that we could speed up the pace of bringing new employees on. For example, when we first came on, it took a new employee about 2 to 3 weeks to get access to all their applications. And within a year, all new employees were getting applications on day one. And then we had We had refined the process of onboarding and securely onboarding so easily during the pandemic. There was absolutely no change in their onboarding process. The only difference was instead of employees being at an office picking up a machine was being drop shipped to their home. So we leveraged, our knowledge, our experience, and getting them into a place where it was just, rinse and repeat no matter where they are. And now this organization is not just growing in San Francisco and the Bay Area, but 50% of their employee base is outside of their main office, including overseas as well. So that's how all of these are three of my major clients and how they're using our services in different ways and augmenting existing IT or being the entire IT department that they're looking to us for knowledge and support. Back to you, Terry.
Mike, thanks very much. Yeah, so we've covered the people side of the organization. We've covered technology, and obviously have seen some examples of companies being able to leverage themselves by leveraging outside business acumen and process and systems and talent. So it holds true in accounting and finance as well, which is the last thing we'll cover. And we'll go to Mark in a moment. And Mark and I work together quite a bit. And in my way of thinking, outsourcing in accounting and finance is really a critical part of helping company leadership gain visibility, confidence, and decision support. It certainly seems like that's even more relevant today than it might have been a year ago. So how do you see that, and how are you working with clients in those areas?
Well, finance is the most important thing in business, as you know, Terry. No, but in reality, we all work really well together. I mean, think of the strength of bench that we have on this call. It's I'm super happy to be working with all of you. If we go to the first slide, it highlights kind of the traditional view that many of us have of a company, an operating company with a finance department. And many things have changed, and hopefully a lot of the people that are on this call have a different view, or they don't, and they're here to learn a little bit more about what can happen. But the traditional FTE, full-time equivalent, comes in many different shapes and sizes, and therefore costs. When a company has scale, complexity, different timelines needed for management insights, financial insights, compliance, those skills, those FTEs need to be matched with the size of your organization, and that's the traditional view. So skill levels command salaries, different benefits, creativity, and compensation structures. And I look to Jill for those types of insights. When turnover happens, you have to deal with that. It's painful. And so when you knock off one of these individuals you see on your screen, these are not real pictures of people. These are images that I gleaned from the internet, but you have to replace them. So do you really want that accounting clerk that has been there for 20 years? I mean, they're nice to see in the hallway, but do you want that person? You want them to elevate in their career for everything that Jill talked about. Full-time equivalents cost full-time. So in this image, I say 6 FTEs costs 6 FTE. And it's useful to have full-time equivalents. It's useful to have employees, but you got to have them in the right parts of your company. And in some cases, on the transactional accounting side and some internal oversight in producing those reports that Terry, your team, helps clients understand the value of, you don't need them to be permanently employed by your organization. And so what I wanted to do, move on to the next slide, I want to highlight the company of the future and how BPM gets involved. So this is purely a nice visualization to start the discussion. And I typically do have this discussion about customization of your skill set, your team. it doesn't mean that you're going to have two people sitting at what looks like a cafeteria table with a bunch of diagrams behind them. But you get the point. You may have a principal, you may have a CFO, you may have a VP of finance, and then you might want to augment it or replace it with people on our side. And so we've got different levels to deploy. Terry's team comes in at the CFO, financial insight level, and we work with Terry's group quite a bit. But accounting knowledge, compliance knowledge can be met with my group. And we have a partner. We actually have 3 partners in the San Francisco Walnut Creek office that we have a team of 60 individuals that are specific to this practice, made up of managers, associates, bookkeepers. We even have some India offshore resources as well for high volume. Those skill sets can be met with specialization, either industry or specific systems, legacy systems like Michael was talking about, or deploying new systems. And the typical BPM outsourced team will involve all of these levels. We're not a staffing organization. We're not a Robert Half, although there are utilities there, and Terry's team can talk to the value proposition of that type of outsourcing. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to meet the skill sets, the industry expertise, and the systems that are customized, the right mix to you. And the beauty with this type of deployment is, fractional is truly down to fractions. On many of my clients, I spend half an hour a month, on the actual operational side, making sure that we're moving things forward, meeting the client's needs. On others, I spend more time, and same with managers. Some managers are deployed and know that they're meeting with clients for full days, partial days, and same with bookkeeping. So if we move on to the next slide, I wanted to give an example of a large company, what I'm going to call staff augmentation, and we talk a little bit about outsourcing versus augmentation. But you can imagine anything from large private equity fund. I work with a lot of big real estate funds. Any organization with many subsidiaries, maybe international consolidations. There's high volume pushes that are needed. And so if you're kind of moving with this vision here, one side is the company, their current finance department. Maybe you do have a pretty robust internal finance group. But many organizations have these pinch points. So on the BPM side, we can come in and remove that haste makes waste type of issue pinch point. Removing those late nights and long weekends. Does that sound good to anybody? Well, I mean, many times when I have conversations, the controllers, the CFOs say, but that's the way it's always been done. I had to do that, and you looked at what Jill was talking about. You're trying to make the morale of your team strong. You're trying to keep them enthusiastic about the organization. You're trying to elevate them, through their career. And you can be more strategic by removing those pinch points. And so we deploy, for an example, real estate fund. We've got a month-end close data import team that is, super ninja-like in receiving data from all the different properties, clarifying the data, making sure that it looks good, reformatting it to what your current system is, whether it's a Yardi, an MRI, a NetSuite, whatever it is. Receiving that data, getting it ingested, and checking that it's ready for your financial department to be strategic, creative, and report on it. We also have a group that does the reporting. So interacting, with your financial systems, specifically skilled in the industry, to use those systems that are industry specific. And what is the result? Well, in cases when somebody gets sick, or I always say win the lottery and doesn't show up, we can deploy our people, either the manager, or in some cases I've rolled up my sleeves and got in there and made sure that the deadlines are met. And similarly, we can scale up on the bookkeeper, associate side and fill those gaps. So let's move on to the next slide, which is the mid-sized company. And you're getting the point here that on one side, you've got your finance department of any size, and they cost a full-time equivalent. They're skilled exactly what you need. On our side, we again adjust maybe a similar team to specifically fit into what you're looking for, to remove those pinch points or to fully supplement and replace what could be internal operations. Many companies want to have a CFO or VP of finance, and that might make sense. Others want to replace one of those people with somebody that can be more fractional and maybe bring a better strength of bench to the group. With the mid-sized companies, typically we're asking the question, can you keep the transaction process and internal controls tight by deploying new technology on our side to streamline how those transactions are processed through a good internal control framework, usually using technology to make it super tight, and then we are coming in and helping with the month-end close. So we'll typically have a manager, a senior, and a bookkeeper fractionally doing that work. And then we can run things like the procure to pay function, or the recording and reconciliation of payroll, and checking that the revenue recognition is being done according to GAAP. We can even do the collections and customer payment applications. So meanwhile, you'll always have the strength of bench like you're seeing here in the background. We also have specialists that look at internal control design and documentation. We have a technical accounting group. I love to get involved in technical accounting items, but we need to make sure that you're getting the full spectrum or the full work product that you need to meet either your auditor's requirements, your bank requirements, and that it's industry specific. So if we move on to the last size company, this is just to give you the full spectrum, the startup example. So the startup example is typically the principal, the founder, just wants to spend the cash and make sure the venture capital firm stays off their back. But they also know that at some point they're going to get audited, and they want to make their lives easier, and they want to keep their spend down. My question a lot of times is, who is this unicorn CFO? You give them the title of CFO, and Terry's smiling a little bit because this happens. Somebody comes in and says, I could do the books. Let me focus on it. Do you really want that individual to do your books and you're going to give them 10% of the initial company? That's not who you're hiring. You want to think about starting with the right systems. So again, with the systems we work with, we are at the expert level on NetSuite, Sage Intacct, MRI, Yardi. We can implement most of those, or work with affiliates that can implement them. And then we bolt on all kinds of great systems for procure to pay, inventory management, revenue recognition, payroll, and where we run into questions on payroll, we call Jill. But the key here is that you set your systems up correctly, and you can scale up or down and custom to you. So that's what I had to your answer to your question, Terry. Hopefully I addressed it sufficiently.
That's perfect. And I hope everyone's getting the theme that in all cases, the outsourcing need, we hope, is a component part of enabling the strategic vision for the company, getting leadership to get more visibility and confidence in what's happening in the business. In the case of finance, this is really all about the business, leveraging itself and evidencing itself, right? If you are the CEO, founder, executive director, whatever the structure, general partner, it's critical, obviously, that you know what's going on, but there are also going to be a host of external stakeholders that need to have the same level of comfort. They need to see a level of credibility and timeliness that makes them feel comfortable. So for us, when we work with Mark, the sort of non-accounting, business growth metrics, unit economics in a SaaS business or a nonprofit or a manufacturing industrials business, all of these things can enable decision making, especially if it's been a hard year, and they will make external stakeholders feel very comfortable, whether those are investors, whether it's the bank that looking at their debt portfolio, or someone that may want to buy the company, right? So these are all critical things to enable the success of the business, and they apply to everyone, to startups, to 20 to 40-year-old startups who may have been living in a bit of a point of stasis and now have reached a point of inflection, or they want to sell the business, or an executive director in a not-for-profit that has new grants or new donors, and they need to have some accountability for that. All of these things compel us to leverage outsourcing properly, leverage the people we have, and then evidence ourselves successfully to ourselves and to the outside world. So hopefully that all makes sense. So we're going to leave a few minutes for questions if people have them. If you do, jump onto the Q&A section and drop a question in there. I have a question for Jill. So Jill, it's been a very interesting year, of course, and I'm curious if you have seen some success stories in clients that have been able to turn a corner and increase their engagement in the business or the organization during the last 8-9 months.
Thanks, Terry. So I have a particular client in mind for that has a chief people officer that has made a priority of engagement and really ensuring people feel part of the organization. This is an entity that is they have broken apart from another organization and now going through a bunch of M&A transactions. And their core functioning and their core HR department has been top priority. And I honestly think this is going to be a huge success story with this client. And it's because I would argue they're making people a priority from day one. And it's an interesting time with this pandemic is affecting us in such huge ways that the connectedness that people can find in their organization can be game changing. And so when you're honoring people, you're going to retain those people. When you're ensuring that they're connected and feeling a part of the organization, you're going to retain those people. And when you are growing fast, like this organization is, it's going to be scaling from 45 to 300 in potentially the next 9 months, they've got to get that basis down from day one. And I think they are successfully doing that.
Mark, this one's for you, and I'll share a perspective on my end. We have seen, in spite of COVID and in spite of an interesting year, the private investment into companies has been extremely active, especially active in the last 4 or 5 months, and that looks like that will continue. And that would include venture investment. That includes large family offices investing directly into companies and founders. That also includes ownership transition, long-term companies that are finding a harvest strategy and a retirement in M&A and selling their business. Especially for maybe the venture side, what advice might you give to a founder or a startup that could guide them in making sure that they have all the available options in a capital raise?
Yeah, exit planning is something you should start at the same time you're starting your company. Is one thing I've heard before. And there's some passionate entrepreneurs that believe that they're gonna pass away with their company, and that's fine too. But you should think about your legacy, and valuation of companies is based on the the financial information that you can provide, as well as some crystal ball of what's going to happen in the future. But that crystal ball is as good as, you know, the market research your buyer has. What you can provide is really crystal clear financial information and give them confidence that the documentation that you have in place is not going to create a liability from a tax perspective, or that they're gonna stumble upon some realization in revenue rec. We have these conversations all the time where companies saying, do we really need to implement that? Does it need to be GAAP? And we say, no, I mean, it doesn't need to be GAAP, but typically, a couple years down the road, you're talking about maybe going public. You're talking about acquisition. You're talking about private equity investment. They want GAAP, or international financial reporting standards. Do you want to report on both because the international investors are coming in? We're happy to have those discussions, and I enjoy it very much.
Yeah, we call that business acumen as a service, being able to properly and credibly sort of show your numbers. And if you're a high growth company and you might your valuation may be based on a multiple of revenue, it's pretty important to understand that the revenue that you think you have is the revenue as others might see it, as they use their common set of languages as they evaluate companies.
There's a lot of different revenues out there. Some of them are real, some of them are not.
They are. To our attendees, I want to thank everyone for joining and spending a little bit less than an hour with us. Our contact information is here. You can also obviously find us on the BPM website. But thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season, and we look forward to staying in touch. Talk soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, everyone.